I am Pastor Adam, and welcome to the Clackamas United Church of Christ Facebook page. And we have the great honor of having with us today Eric Law, the Reverend Eric Law, from the Kaleidoscope Institute. So, hi, Eric.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm doing great too, because I am excited for this three-part series to have with you over your book, which is titled, if I can put it here, Fear Not, Living Grace and Truth in a Frightened World. And Eric, I was reading through this and I thought, wow, during this time of COVID-19, and there's all this fear happening, how great would it be to see if I could get the author of the book to come on Facebook with us and talk about fear and COVID-19 and how fear spreads and what faith has to do with it. And so I emailed you and you were so gracious and you were like, yes, let's do this.
Yep.
So thank you.
Yeah, when I asked my publisher to reissue a second edition of the book last year, I had no idea that that we will be facing this pandemic and all of the ramification of it, and of course, fear became a major topic, or is in the air that we breathe, right? In some way, literally. Right.
Yes.
And so certainly Fear Not was getting a lot of attention. So I hope I do it justice. I do my book justice, because the book took 10 years to write.
Yes. That's good. We've already got a comment from Megan, and everybody, if you're watching this, we want you to know that this is not just a book study. This is a book conversation with Eric. So if you have comments or questions or anything you would like to bring in, please put those in the comment section. And the first thing that I want to tackle about fear, Eric, is that we are a progressive church, and a lot of progressives have fear about the collar.
Collar?
Yes. And so I was wearing my collar because I like to wear the collar because it's the rainbow. I've got the rainbow on it. And so I want you all to know that Eric is down with the rainbow. So you have nothing to fear from the collar that Eric is wearing. So there we go. Debbie says that she hasn't finished the book yet, which is great, because Debbie, we are doing 3 weeks of this. So this is our first session in a 3-week series. We're going to be here at 4:00 Pacific talking with Eric about his book, and we're kind of going in order of the book. So if you read it kind of in thirds, you'll have a pretty good way of keeping up with what we're doing. So Jeff says that he's halfway through the book, and so far so good. It's a fantastic book. So Eric, once again, thank you for being with us. Let's start off by just kind of you introducing yourself to us, and also the Kaleidoscope Institute and the Building Bridges program. So can you tell us a little bit about your backstory?
Yeah, I'm the founder and executive director of a not-for-profit organization called Kaleidoscope Institute, and our mission is to provide leadership resources for developing diverse and sustainable communities. And within that umbrella, we provide for many denominations anti-racism training. We provide consultation for churches dealing with diverse environment, interracial dialogue, intergroup dialogue. And lately, we've been working on a new model called Holy Currencies, where we help churches to develop brand new ministries from scratch that are sustainable and missional and entrepreneurial. So that's just kind of like the umbrella of what I do. And the generations of work that I leading up to the Institute has been with interracial work, intergroup conflict, not management, but really engaging people in constructive conversation about our differences. And one of my major accomplishments was back in 1992, when the Los Angeles riots happened, I was charged by the Interreligious Council of Southern California and the Episcopal Diocese to create and train people to facilitate interracial dialogue on race involving people from 9 major religions all across Southern California. And we did that for 2 years. And that generated a lot of resources and energy around dealing with differences. So one of the big thing I do is addressing differences and how we can deal with it constructively versus destructively, and often using fear to cut off and separate people and isolate people, creating more distrust and therefore eliminating the possibility of us being a community together to solve problems that we face, like a pandemic.
Yes, and one of the big issues that we have right now is that it's hard to trust one another. Mm-hmm. And some of that is sewn into the system, baked into the cake, it almost seems like. It's like, I mean, we've always had this issue with the divide in politics, but it seems like it's been growing more and more just in the last few years. And I don't want to blame anyone for it, although, what do you do about it? I guess that's the issue.
One of the things that people are now experiencing in a direct way is this thing called social distancing.
Yes.
Right. And so in the introduction of the book, I talk about the difference between risk management versus ministry, following Christ, to do ministry. And risk management is based on distrust.
Yes.
Okay, so ministry become managing the risk of not being sued. So we're going to watch our pastor with a, watchful eye so you don't abuse anybody. You can't say certain things so that you don't get sued. You have to manage your money correctly so that you don't get chased after by IRS and so on. And that's not ministry. That's based on distrust. And social distancing is if you can look at social distancing as risk management. I need to put a mask on and I need to maintain 6 feet distance so I can lower my risk of getting infected. Okay, that's often what people think. So it's about risk management if you take it that way, right? But if you take it as a ministry, that in spite of our fear of catching the disease, which is the right thing to do to keep the distance, right? That I intend to include you, to reach out and connect with you, despite my fear. Does that make sense? That's what Jesus calls us to do. Jesus addressed fear all the time, but that's not the issue. Despite our fear, we continue to make connection. So you can see people finding very creative way to connect, even with social distance. I call that holy distance in, distance-in, instead of distancing. So we set aside the distance between us, making it holy. That's ministry. So that I can honor your boundary and protect you. So it's not about me. It's about not if I have the disease, which I might not know. Yeah. I need to protect you by keeping the distance. So by making the distance holy, I am dealing with our fears together, but as with the connection of being in community together. Mm-hmm. So yes. We change the narrative of risk management to having the courage to reach across our distance in spite of our fear so that we can have community and communion.
So reaching across the social distance that we have now, or the physical distance, and also the distance between Democrats and Republicans you can also bridge. I know that's a big part of your work too. Differences between races and going into areas of the country, which are really all over here in Portland as well, where you're trying to bring different races together, where there's racism, and having these big conversations is a lot of it's based on fear. You start off your book. Let's get into your book. You started off with a great story about one of the phobias that a lot of people have. It's either speaking in public or heights, right? And I have a big phobia of heights, and so do you. And so you start off your book with a kind of a basic fear that almost everybody can identify with, which is a great way to move into other fears that we're talking about. So could you talk about a little bit about your phobias, and also how to link phobias in order to manage them in healthy ways?
So fear in itself is not the problem. Fear is almost a biological biological reaction to something in our environment that basically signal us that you need to pay attention. That it is calling us to pay attention. That means there might be danger ahead. Okay, that's what fear is about, right? And fear could turn into a phobia when we avoid fear. Okay, so I never want to have that feeling of, height, falling, again. So I avoid tall building, I avoid climbing anything, and then I will, then I develop a phobia, right? And I will never enjoy a great view, which is a great loss, right? So how do you get out of turning a fear into a phobia? So let's take social distancing, right? That could become a phobia if we took it only as risk management. That I will never want to touch people again, and you see this on the street when the people who are approaching phobia are the ones that look down and with the mask, and they don't want to relate to anybody. The ones that is trying to break out of that is the one that attempt to interact with you, that wave, in spite of this distance, right? So that's the difference. You can begin to see. So say I have a fear of height, right? And the way to deal with that is to face the fear mentally, taking it all the way to its ultimate worst ending, which is often pain, chaos, and death. Okay, right? You have to face every fear that way. Okay, so and then what I call linking, right? So for me to go from fear of height to dying, say I'm in a condo, 330-story tall, and there's a balcony with a view to die for, right? And I have a fear. My fear signal ran up, right? So my brain is telling me, pay attention, some dangers ahead. So I could, if I step out of the balcony and it's wet, and the rail is not strong, one slip, I'm off. And I lean on the railing that I don't know is strong, and it's not, I will fall down 30-story, I'm dead. So 2 links, I'm dead, right? So this is a real fear, and it's justified, people. Don't feel bad about that. I never feel bad about that. Okay, it's justified. All the energy and the focus that I need to check out the floor. It's not wet. Shake the balcony, the railing to make sure it's strong, so I don't lean on something that's not strong. And then after I've done that, I pay attention. I use my brain, my analysis. I can step out on the balcony. I'm not afraid. Okay. Now, so that's a justified fear, caused me to do something immediate about that. Okay. Let's do another fear. I have a fear of public speaking. And people will say, I'm going to die if I had to make a speech, right? You hear that, right?
Mhm.
Now, how long does it take for you to make a bad speech to death? Okay, link it, right? Okay, I made a bad speech, and my bishop found out about it.
Yeah.
I got fired from my job as a pastor. So I couldn't pay my mortgage, and my family left me because there's no food.
Yes.
And then I'm on the street and it's raining and cold, and I caught a cold. And then I don't have insurance.
Mhm.
And so on and so on. And then, I died. Right.
Yeah.
It took many links to get to death. So my brain says, pay attention. But if I use my experience and willingness to face it to all the way to death, then I know, okay, I have time.
Yeah.
So what is this fear about? So that's the question coming back, right? If I'm not going to die in the next 15 minutes or next hour, the next day from this fear, right? So what is this really about? That's the question, right? So this is really maybe about my lack of self-esteem. Okay, so that I can do is I can take counseling. I can take a course on speech writing and speech delivery and speak, learn from TED Talk. I can fix that. Easy, no problem. I can do that, right? But what is this fear really about? About self-esteem? What else? It could be for me about my need to have a community that loves me, accepts me unconditionally, not based on my performance. Doesn't that everybody needs that?
Yeah.
And then when you come back out from ask the broader questions, then the fear now point to potential for ministry. So I'm going to deal with my self-esteem issue. Sure enough. But I think I'm going to spend my energy developing community, loving community, inclusive community that practice Jesus' unconditional love, so that more and more people can experience this unconditional love and lessen the fear of a lot of people of fear of being rejected, right? So fear become an opening for me to enter into a reflection on what is really important here and what I should spend my time and energy focusing on transforming, so that myself and others may not get into the phobia which blocks us from enjoying life, from encounter real people.
Yeah, your comment about community, I think, goes along with Erica's question here. And friends, if you're watching and you have questions or comments, feel free to put those in the chat section, and I'll especially bring in your questions. Erica asks, what about people who already have social anxiety? Social distancing for us is almost a gift. LOL. And I tend to be an introvert, and sometimes, right? And so I come into my office here, and it's often a sanctuary, and want to get away from people, but want to get away from my family. How about that? That's good, right? But there is something about being isolated that can be a gift for some of us. But I imagine there's not a tension, but a balance that we all need to seek in this.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the social anxiety as a fear to address, and this might be a good time to do it because you have the space to do it.
Yeah.
Right. People actually respecting your space. Wow. Isn't that nice?
Yes.
But then the anxiety is still there. So I would link that social anxiety to that ultimate, place, the worst scenario, and face that, and then come back around and say, what is this anxiety really about?
Mm.
I can't answer that for you, right? But it's up to each person to do that. And I think that's a spiritual journey. I learned that when one of my mentor, when I asked him, well, how do I know I'm called to ministry, any kind of ministry? Okay.
Yeah.
And he said, well, you need to know your gift, what you're good at, and not be ashamed of that. You need to have friends who will tell you the stinking truth about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
People who will hold a mirror for you, right? And you need to pray. You have to have a relationship with God. And the final thing he said is, you got to know the dark side of yourself. You got to know that which you're afraid of. You got to know and dive into your fear, your apprehension, your weakness, and not be afraid of it, but to go in and explore that. And when you go into that, you will discover your call to ministry stronger than any gift that you have.
Wow.
I mean, I'm a talented person. I'll admit it, right? I sing, I compose, I write, but that does nothing for me until I'm willing to look at my own fear,
How do you do?
my lack of self-esteem,
Yeah.
fear of rejection, and ultimately, as I get older, fear of death.
Yeah.
Fear of death. I talk about sex on the first chapter, second chapter, fear of sex. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about sex freely right now.
Mm-hmm.
And not until I faced those, I was not able to fully realize what I'm called to be as a child.
I think that is so fascinating to me that they gave you that advice to look at your vulnerabilities, your fears, kind of stare them in the face in order to discover more about yourself. How do you go about doing that? Because I think that for the most part, it's so painful to do that, and we would much rather avoid it. And a lot of it gets probably stuck in our unconscious. And so how do you shine the light on your fears and anxieties when we would much rather avoid them?
So back to the book, I think that in order for us to really face that fear in a constructive and spiritual centered way, we need community. We need community. We need to have people around us that we connected with who would not judge us, who will be okay if we say the most awful thing, or the racist thing, or the sexist thing, and say and really be gentle and kind in responding to that. I was working on of a new song called "Better Angel." You can get it on YouTube. "Better Angel," and and Google my name. And one line says, "Thoughtless words are met with kind-hearted rhymes." And I think that's the kind of community that we need to have, so that I can truly be free to really say or express that which I fear the most, and have a place to work on it. So I would do one thing, would be to do a journal. So I do a journal, and I would every day, not every day, but once in a while, I'll sit down. Something bothers me today, and I would write, what is this about? It triggered this fear in me. Why? Where does it come from? What do they want from me by triggering this fear? I have my share of people saying awful things to me. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
As a person of color in the United States, as an immigrant, as a person who speaks with an accent, and as a person who looked like me these days, with so much anti-Asian sentiment emerging, that has always been there, and I am afraid to drive through certain part of our country by myself.
Yeah.
And is my fear justified? You bet. Okay. But then I need to do my own work beyond that fear. That I need to do my own work in order to be fair about this, right? So I would do my own work, and whenever there is something that's triggered in me. So in the book, there's an exercise where you watch a political speech. Okay, a lot of them is coming up. Biden, Trump, and all of their cronies. Okay,
Yep.
just sit down and write down what fear is being projected in this speech. What fear is being triggered in me? Write it down. Okay. And then write down, how do I react to it? What is my initial reaction to this fear? By this person evoking that fear, what does that person want me to do? Do we want me to buy something? Do we want me to put my vote somewhere? Right? That's what they want. But I had to do my own work and find out why is my fear being triggered? What is this really about for me? Not until you do that, you will always be manipulated by a politician and marketeer to want us to buy their stuff and give them power.
Yeah.
So to do that, and if you watch any of the newscasts, whether you're watching Fox News or MSNBC, which is kind of too extreme, okay? And I'm one of the few people that get mail from the Tea Party and the Democratic National Party, right? So I read this stuff. I wanted to know what the narrative is. Okay, so you watch these newscasts. Don't need to watch it long. All you need is 5 to 10 minutes of each. You don't need to overdose on it, right? But you need to watch the other side. Don't create a phobia of the others who voted differently last time around, or who had a different narrative. What you want to do is know what your narrative and what you're responding to, and what the other narrative that you're not familiar with, and get and try to understand that, right? And I bet you will have two completely different narratives about the pandemic. And it's already happening. Okay. The scientist has a different narrative. Okay. The Democrat has a different narrative. President Trump has a different narrative. Okay. And you need to know what they are. And these narratives trigger fears in us to get us to pay attention. Okay. One part of a narrative is that guns are essential in this time of pandemic. Why? Because without your gun, you can't protect yourself. From what? Shortage of food, maybe? You can't shoot a virus, right? What is that fear about? What is this narrative about, right? For a gun owner whose fear is triggered by this, then find out what this fear really is about. Why are there people going out to hoard toilet paper? What fear is being triggered? I'm not judging. I'm just saying, ask the question. And if that person is in a loving community, we can ask those questions. What is this about? I did that in the grocery store in the early days of the shutdown, and the shelf was almost empty, and I finally said, people putting a lot of stuff in the cart, and I said out loud in this grocery store, and I said, yesterday, today, and tomorrow, we have the same amount of food. The difference is how we manage them.
Yeah.
Now. And if we operate, and then I didn't say any more than that, right? But if you operate out of fear, then we'll be hoarding, and we're distancing ourselves from others. So the next thing I said is that I'll be happy to share what I have in my refrigerator in case that we have a shortage of food out there. But I don't think that's going to happen in Southern California in Palm Springs right now.
Yeah.
But I'll be I live on Sahara, and any of you who need extra food, come to me.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no need to do this. So
Yeah.
what is this fear about? Right. And I think that I am secure enough to address my own fear and did my analysis that I did have a fear of running out of food, right? And I link it to death. That's not going to happen. Yeah. Not for me. Not for me. I'm a very privileged person. I am blessed with a lot of resources. I am not going to die from lack of food. So what is this fear really about? Right? And that takes me to wanting to make sure other people have food, because I come from a family where my mother and my father told stories about starvation during World War II in China. Wow.
Yeah.
For them, that fear was linked to direct experience, even though it might not be happening now, right? And that fear is real, right? But how do I help me and others to address that, right? So
yes. Yeah, you're reminding me of the story of Jesus multiplying the fish and the loaves, right? And there have been all of these memes where Jesus multiplies the toilet paper for us. And it's all about us sharing what we have, which is exactly what you've been talking about: food, toilet paper, how to live in community with one another. Let's see. Debbie says, what if you don't recognize your fears? And I imagine that goes back to what you're saying about community, right? It's a place where we can, at its best, a place where we can learn from one another about ourselves and about our fears and about the dark stuff that's within us that you've been talking about in a gentle way.
I think all of us have to figure out our own pattern of how we react to fear. Okay, how we react to fear being triggered, right?
Yeah.
A person from a alcoholic family will react very differently, whether and then a person who come from a law enforcement family, and to a person who grew up with guns, those are all very different. But recognizing your reaction to fear, this thing that's happening in Georgia with
Aubrey. Yeah.
I have no doubt that the McMartin father's son was fearful of something.
Yeah.
And their reaction was one that's very destructive. Okay. And I will judge there, because I think, that destructive thing is, I'm a Christian, thou shalt not kill. All right. I take that very seriously. Okay. So
kind of plain and cut and dry right there. Yeah. Yeah.
I take that very seriously. Right. And so they need to recognize their pattern and stop that. Are they really in danger? Who is really in danger here? Right. The person with the gun or the person in a running shorts? And is this fear founded?
Yeah.
With this particular person running down the street, right? Do they have a community that they can talk about this? That's the issue.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And how do we create these communities? How do we reach across the divide? Because we are separated more and more and more now. And if you do what I asked you to do and watch the news, you will hear these different narratives. And we almost never hear from each other.
Yes.
And we need to have a community that does that.
Yes.
Bring us together on that.
Yes. We've got 2 more comments and questions. Vicky says, I've heard it said that human beings experience two emotions, fear and love. Maybe that's like the basis of it. Have you heard this, and can you comment on that?
From the book, Richard Nixon said, I never thought I'd write a book and quote Richard Nixon. People don't react, for love, but fear. And they never teach you in Sunday school. He actually addressing the religious community. And so, according to Richard Nixon, fear is more powerful than love. According to Jesus, love is more powerful than fear. You decide, right?
I think I'll go with Jesus on that one. But I'm just wearing a collar, so I don't know.
see, I mean, this is an important thing to think about, right?
Yes. Yeah.
How do we approach the pandemic and the shelter in place, all of that, new rules and new science that address our fear, which is fair and good. We address our fear often, uncertainty in life, by technology and science, and by creating rules, which is exactly what we're doing, right? Science helping us figure out a vaccine and all of that stuff, and the rules of social distancing and others, staying at home, is a way of keeping us safe from the spread of the virus. And that's one narrative, right? And if we approach that out of love, okay, then creativity happens, right? One place I want to feel good about is go to CNN, Google CNN and impact or community impact or something like that. And it's a web page that have a lot of good feel-good stories about what people do, finding creative ways. So one person trained her dog to deliver food, so there's no touch for the elderly. Another young people group figure out a safe way to connect, to deliver goods that elderly needs that are more at risk. And they, and there's a lot of amazing story that people out of love, finding connection. Okay. And of course you get the fear story, like when many of the cities started opening up and we started hearing story about someone who refused to wear a mask, and in Walmart, and the security guard asked them to go away because they didn't follow the rules, and they say, how dare you tell me not to wear a mask, and they start a fight.
Yeah.
That's out of fear, right? The narrative of I don't need to wear a mask because this thing is a hoax, this thing is a scam, is a narrative that is based on another kind of fear, rather than the fear of the coronavirus and what it did to the physical stuff, right? So if you do the link, you can actually link the coronavirus to death fairly quickly. Okay, I could get it tomorrow if I'm not careful, and if I'm in the risk age or with precondition, I could die within 15 days. Okay, so it's very imminent that I need to do something about it, and therefore social distancing, following the rules, checking out the science or every step of the way, every time that I know, is really important. The other narrative is what? I don't know. I mean, the other narrative is that I have an image to keep up. So if I put on my mask, then I'm showing weakness, and I have to be strong. I have to be strong to get through this. And besides, I didn't see anybody dying around me.
Yes. Yeah. there's also a lot of, you can't tell me what to do. Don't tread on me.
So that's that. What fear is that? What fear is triggered to cause them to go there, right? I'm not judging. I want to find out. I want to understand. I want to be in a room or on a Zoom to really listen to that narrative and listen to what that fear is about, and engage in a linking exercise. Wouldn't that be fun to do? Right? How long does it take for you not to wear a mask to address your fear about whatever you're fearing to get to death, right? Versus the fear of the actual virus, actually getting the virus, if that is real, right? So,
yeah. You end your first chapter with this great reflection, and my inner feminist was so excited about this. It was this reflection on the women as they were running right into what I would imagine would be the heart of fear, right at the tomb of Jesus. In this dark place is where the women go. If you could talk a little bit about that story and how the women in the Gospels could be a good model for us in dealing with fear.
So in the Christian scripture, you see in all four of the Gospel, eyes were gone, they were hiding, they were fearful, and they were fearful in such a way that it turned into a phobia.
Yes.
I don't want nothing to do with Jesus. I don't know him. Peter said that, right? So they develop a phobia of anybody associated with Jesus, social distancing,
Yes.
Yes. And except the women. And the women were at the foot of the cross in John's gospel. They were that close. The other gospels that they were looking at a distance. And then they were not afraid. They were fearful, but they don't let that stop them from approaching that which they fear the most, the death of Jesus. So they went to the tomb, right? So they have 3 days to think about this, all right? And then they took courage and they went to the tomb and to face the ultimate defeat. So the linking, right?
Yes.
For 3 years they have followed Jesus, right? And this is the end, right? And in that facing of that ultimate defeat, ultimate death of a movement, they discover resurrection. They come out energized. They come out telling stories, right? And I think I love the Easter story. The Easter cycle of the church is wonderful. Is that Easter, Good Friday and Easter is about how we address our fear as Christian. That Jesus in his earthly ministry had took us all the way to that which we fear the most, which is death. And then had the audacity to say, that's not the end. That's not the end. So now what? If that's not the end, then we need to come out of the empty tomb and say, what is this really about? What, now that we're not afraid of dying, okay, what is Jesus really about? Okay. And then you begin to notice that Jesus is about healing the sick, connecting with the disconnected, with the outcast, hanging out with the poor and the powerless and the unclean. Jesus is about confronting the powerful and say, that's not what God intended this world to be. God loves you enough to give you free will, but then we need to figure out as a community how to live together, and to have real discourse with each other, and that, and so Easter is, so we go rah 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 Easter, but really Easter needs to be a very thoughtful time to say, what is this thing about? You know, now that God has, through Jesus Christ, has addressed our ultimate fear, what is the bigger story here? What is the bigger God story? What is the bigger story for you and me and for our community?
Well, I think that is a beautiful way to end our first conversation with you, Eric. Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for watching and for your comments. We will be with Eric again next week on Wednesday at 4 o'clock Pacific time. And again, book is Fear Not, Living Grace and Truth in a World. And you can get it wherever great books are sold. And you can also connect with Eric on Facebook, and over on his website. You can check it out by Googling Kaleidoscope Institute and Eric Law.
And also, if you want to check out my music, which address fear, and many of the lyrics are also in Fear Not in the book. I think my newest studio album is called Upside Down Town. Upside Down Town. And you Google that at my name, and you can find that on Spotify, iTunes, Amazon. Most music carrier will have it. So you can find those songs in the book and listen to what I did with them musically. Okay, and let me know what you think.
Yes, and Eric does Zoom. I mean, before all pandemic, Eric was traveling around the country and leading workshops on how to overcome fear and racism and all of these things. So if you want to connect with Eric about maybe a Zoom talk or something like that, or when this pandemic is over, you can contact him and get a hold of him that way too. So friends, join us again next week, Wednesday at 4 o'clock for the second part of our book discussion on Fear Not, Living Grace and Truth in a Frightened World. Until then, grace and peace be with you.
Stay safe.
Hi everyone, this is Adam Erickson, reminding you that no matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you are welcome at Clackamas United Church of Christ. We are located at 15303 Southeast Webster Road in Milwaukee, Oregon. We are so glad that you found this podcast. All of our podcasts will always be free, but we rely on the financial support of our members and our friends. If this podcast meant something to you, you can help us out in two ways. You can share this podcast with someone you think might be interested. You can also help us financially by donating to the wonderful missions we have here at Clackamas United Church of Christ. To do so, you can go to our Facebook page, our website, or our YouTube channel, and click on the Donate Here button. Our worship services start at 10:30 on Sundays, except for during the summer months when we start at 10 o'clock. If you would like more information on our church, you can visit our website at c-ucc.org. You can also reach out to me through email at adam@c-ucc.org. Until next time, grace and peace be with you.